have spent the last 2 years researching your most recent book, The Education of Millionaires, and in the process, you've developed a reputation as a vocal critic of higher education. Why have you become so riled up about this issue?
Dale, I spent the last 2 years interviewing some of the world's most successful people who started out as college dropouts. And when they started out that way, they were told that they would end up flipping burgers, minimum wage service jobs, and all of them ended up becoming successful founders of companies, mostly millionaires, a few billionaires, all self-made. None of them were born rich. And the reason I wanted to talk to them is because I believe young people, including myself, when I was going through the educational system, have been fed a lie. And that lie is that if you study really hard on all your academics, do well on your tests, get all the check marks boxed off, you're gonna do great once you graduate. That's the fairy tale. And as we've been seeing in particularly the last 3 years since the financial crisis, that fairy tale is coming at an end. And young people now are finding that they've gone through the system, they can't find work, they have all this student debt, an average of $24,000 that they're coming out of the educational system with, adding up to $1 trillion in student debt. It's just reached 1 trillion with a T. This is a massively broken system. And I want to talk to these people because they demonstrate that it is possible to educate yourself outside of this system. There's a distinction between going to school and getting an education, and that's what we're going to be talking about in our segment and really all night tonight. Now, when I talk about this stuff, I often get called a hypocrite because I did go through the system, and people say—
You went to Brown.
I did. I went to Brown. I went through it, and people say, how can you talk about this? But you're actually not only talking the talk. Dale, you're the founder of UnCollege.org, which is a organization of young people leading the charge to show that there are alternatives outside of educational institutions to get an education. You're also a leader as one of the inaugural recipients of the Thiel Fellowship, which I'm sure all of you in this crowd have heard, was Peter Thiel's program to give $100,000 each to 24 young people to stop out of school and get their education out in the real world. So you're a leader, you're walking the walk. Why did you make the choices you've made? What's your educational background?
While I left college in April, Michael, that wasn't actually a big deal for me because dropping out of college wasn't a first. I actually dropped out of 5th grade. I've been an at-risk student for a long, long time. And through that process of skipping middle school and high school, I became an unschooler, the self-directed form of homeschooler. So I went out and found mentors, I built businesses, I did internships, I lived in France, I helped build a library, and was able to get a phenomenal education by turning these extracurricular activities into a cohesive academic program.
Now, Dale, when I talk about these issues, one objection I hear a lot from parents and from students is, well, it's not just about the classes, it's a whole social experience. You go for all the extracurriculars, all the socializing, the friends. Did you, as a young man dropping out of college, are you missing out on the, quote, beer and girls aspect of college?
That actually really wasn't too much of an issue because I prefer guys and champagne, and I found a lot more of that in San Francisco than I ever did at college in Arkansas.
So another objection I've heard a lot, and thank you, Dale.
They're much better in California, too.
So you're recreating your own social experience, too, and you can do that outside of institutions just as well as recreating your education. Another objection I hear a lot, and I've written about you a fair amount, I write for Forbes, there's always one or two commenters that will say, oh, well, that's great for Dale Stevens, he's in the 1%. We've been hearing about the 99% and the 1%. You may not be in the 1% of wealth yet, but I believe you're certainly in the 1% of intelligence. And so how does this apply to more kind of everyday students who aren't necessarily at that elite level of intelligence?
I think the question to ask is whether or not the 19 million college students in the US should be learning almost exactly the same thing in exactly the same way. At college in Arkansas, we had mac and cheese and bacon pizza on Thursdays. We did. And eating mac and cheese and bacon pizza is awesome if you need quick calories. But the thing is that you shouldn't eat mac and pizza all day, every day. I don't think that everybody should drop out of college, but I think there's a large minority of students who would thrive outside of the system. If a large minority does actually skip school, as you suggest in your book, what do you think those students will learn as they choose an alternative path to traditional formal higher education?
So I believe that we are stuck in a matrix around what young people should be learning. And one of the things I'd like to do in our short time here is unplug us from the matrix. And that matrix is that focusing a lot of time on academics is a good thing for every young person, right? I mean, that sounds like kind of apple pie. I mean, how could you disagree with that? And actually, I'm going to disagree with that up here. Obviously, we need some young people focusing on academics. I'm very glad that the doctors that have treated me in my life have focused on medical school and did well on their med school tests. We need lawyers. We need engineers.
I really don't think you should keep cadavers in your garage.
So there's certain things you shouldn't get outside of institutions, but that's actually just a small portion of what our society needs. One thing our society needs desperately right now is more entrepreneurs. We need more young entrepreneurs. We're in a jobs crisis, and there's certain things that aren't learned very well in an academic context. One of those things is how to create economic opportunity, how to create jobs. That tends to be done by people who are getting a more scrappy, street smart kind of education. And we need young people. There's so many young people out of work with and without college degrees. They need to create jobs for themselves and for their peers, and they're not learning how to do that in class. They're not going to learn how to do that in class. They're going to learn how to do it on their own in the real world. And I think you are an example of someone who's doing that, and your peers are. Another objection that I get very frequently when I write about these ideas is the idea that there's certain people who can drop out and do well. Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. But that if we encourage more young people to do this, they're going to drop out and they're not going to end up a billionaire founder of Facebook. They're going to, again, end up in a certain minimum wage service job. What do you say when people say that to you?
Well, first of all, I'm obviously not Mark Zuckerberg. My hair isn't curly enough to start with. And I think that statement stems from an assumption that success is defined in the same way. Obviously, if you want everybody to be a billionaire, not everybody can be a billionaire. And those people also believe that there are 3 doors in life. The paradigm is that either you can go to college, you can get a good job, you can impress your parents, make your teachers proud. You can leave college, be an outlier, start the next Facebook or Apple. Or, more likely, we're told, you can leave college, move in with your parents, and smoke pot in your parents' basement. Now, I haven't done that because my parents don't have a basement. My mom is here tonight. You can verify that with her. But it was these sorts of beliefs that caused me to leave college. I was really frustrated at college because of the gap between theory and practice. There were smart people at college with awesome ideas, but they were more interested in getting degrees than actually learning. And I was sitting in class thinking, what if instead of copying our professor's words verbatim off the blackboard, we instead went out and started businesses, or started companies, or started initiatives, started our own programs? What if we went back to learning as practiced in French salons, where we gathered together to support and challenge each other as we built a better world? I bet if universities stopped issuing credentials, half of the students would be gone by tomorrow morning, because students see universities as a means to an end. We're told that we go to universities because you want to make the big bucks, and in America we value big bucks over big passion. If you go to college, we're told, you're going to get a better job, a better life, and bigger earnings. But I'm not sure that's the right expectation for students to have these days. Do you think students who are going through college today will earn more over the course of their lifetime, Michael?
I'm going to answer that, but first I want to comment on one thing you just said. You talked about this dichotomy where people think if you drop out, either you have a teeny chance of being an outlier and becoming the next billionaire Mark Zuckerberg, or a much, much larger chance of just becoming, sitting in your parents' basement and smoking pot. Well, 40% of people who graduate from college now move back with their parents in their 20s. I was among that 40%. I'm 34 now. In most of my 20s, I was broke. Fortunately, I got out of that largely by learning the skills from the people I spoke to in my research and my book. I was among that 40%. I moved back with my parents between, I think it was 27 and 29. I can verify that you don't have to be a college dropout to be broke in your parents' basement smoking pot.
You also don't have to be a college graduate to be smart and motivated.
You could do that just as well with an Ivy League education. Many people are. And to get out of that, as I fortunately did, you have to learn practical knowledge, not book smarts, but street smarts. And you don't learn that, by definition, you don't learn that in classes. You learn it out in the real world, and we should be telling young people that that is valuable and worthy to be focusing on those kind of career skills that help them create economic opportunity for themselves. So on your question of whether college graduates earn more, yes, clearly there's very strong statistical evidence that the higher education you have is correlated with earning more money. There's two issues with that, though. One is, clearly if you want to be a traditional professional, if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, not only should you go to college, but you have to, and you have to go to grad school. So,
or if you want to be a college professor?
Yeah, or a scientist. There's many things where you should and need to go to college. But for the other cases, which I think is the majority of young people who don't really know what they want to do, who aren't sure exactly, to go and spend $50,000 a year is a very expensive way to figure out what you want to do with your life. And there's cheaper ways, as I think Dale is showing. On the question of earning more, yes, there's statistical correlation between earning more and going to college, but there's a lot of other factors that go into that correlation. There's also intuitively a strong correlation between being a motivated, intelligent, ambitious person and earning more. As our system is currently set up, and it's rapidly changing by a lot of you in the audience, as it's currently set up, most motivated, ambitious, intelligent young people happen to go to college. That doesn't mean college was responsible for their success. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, including some sitting right next to my left here, that if you have the motivation, if you have the drive, you'll do just as well if you don't go to college, because the motivation and the drive is what's driving it. So you're a leader in this movement. You're really the first young person who has a public platform saying that this is an option, this is an alternative for motivated young people. A lot of young people come to you for advice. What do you say when someone comes to you and says, Dale, should I go to college?
I think if you can go to one of the top 10 schools in the world, the Oxfords, the Harvards, the IITs, by all means go. And that's because those schools have a brand name and carry a cachet that means something beyond just the value of the degree. But if you can't go to one of those schools, I think you should think long and hard about what the opportunity cost of doing so is. You don't want to be part of what the New York Times recently called in August, Generation Limbo. The class of college graduates, those under 25, who are graduating from school, spending 4 years getting a BS degree, to work as bartenders collecting welfare checks. 22.5% of college grads, mind you, under 25, are unemployed, and another 22% are working in jobs that don't require their degree. And what's crazy is that in all of this, the message is continually, we need more graduates. But we tend to overlook the economics of scarcity of the argument. As more and more people graduate from universities, and the demand for higher education is growing astronomically. India could build a new campus every 2 weeks until 2025, UNESCO says, just to fulfill its need for higher ed. As more and more people graduate, each degree is worth less and less. It's like we're printing more money.
Multiple bubbles going on here.
But the thing is that we are up here hating on higher education, and that's great for a time. But we need to start thinking about what the future looks like. After talking with these millionaires and billionaires who've managed to educate themselves outside of traditional paths, what do you think education will look like in 10 years, Michael?
I think education right now is roughly where the internet was in 1995. And I'm not saying that metaphorically. I think that we're going to see a transformation wash over our society as large as the transformation that has been happening in the last 15 years or so in education. It's the last big area of our economy and our culture that hasn't been touched by any innovation. It just hasn't. You in the audience are the leaders. The first people touching education with innovation are in this room right now. And I believe that we are going to see in the next 3 to 5 years a company or a few companies arise that get this right, that deliver high quality education to the masses inexpensively. I think it's going to be a company, not the government, who does it. It could be one of the companies in the room now, or some of the people go on to found that company. And we're going to see massive, massive disruption. And it's an industry that needs disruption right now. There's a bubble in higher education right now. And just as in the subprime mortgage mess that we're just coming out of, there are people in higher education. There are many, many idealistic people in higher education. Many of you are in this room. I would say, though, that when you start getting a bubble dynamic going, you also have people in higher education, I believe, some people who are taking on the morality of subprime lenders. They're selling substandard products that they know are substandard. They're selling them at outrageously inflated prices. They're selling them to people they know are not appropriate customers who can't afford it and who are having to take on massive amounts of debt that they're going to go on and possibly default on. That's unacceptable. It needs to be changed, and it will be changed, and a lot of you in this room are changing it right now.
Michael, I think there are definitely going to be a few companies that arise to change higher education, and that's because if you take a step back and look at what the outcomes are that college should provide, as I see it, there are 4. College provides educational content, it provides a network, it provides a signal, and it provides a community. And I think companies will arise so that students can go and pick and choose and form their education on their own terms. What's been really interesting to me over the last 6 months as I've left college and started this journey as an educational deviant is seeing how much animosity I've gotten from other students. Essentially, I'm telling students that they've just bought a new car and that it's crap. And they don't want to hear that. It's like everyone is fine with being in prison as long as everybody else is in prison too. But as soon as someone stages the jailbreak, everyone freaks out, and that's precisely what's happening right now. When you walk into Starbucks, you're given the choice between a latte and a mocha. Or you can make a third choice and walk out. Nobody tells you that. When you go to college and you sit at convocation day, listen to the president talk about the accolades of the school, and outline the paths between law school and medical school. What nobody tells you is that you can make a third choice and you can walk out. That's what I've done.